Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new to my channel, my name is Renee. It is very nice to meet you. Today's video I'm going to be sharing with you guys the best and worst books that I read this year. I read 30 books this year. I read 15 fiction books and 15 nonfiction books, and I wanted to share the best ones that I read and then the worst ones that I read. That way for the new year you know which books that you can pick up for a good motivational kick in the butt and which ones to kind of just skip. If you guys aren't following me already on Goodreads, it's just at Renee Amberg. If you guys want to see all of the reviews for the books that I read this year, you can go ahead and look onto my account on there. I do reviews for every book that I read. Let's go ahead and get into it. I have the list on my phone. I did this last year too, so if you guys want to watch the books that I read last year, I read a different 30 books. You can go ahead and look on that. I'll pop it in the description box if you want, as well as on the screen. So these are the best and worst books of the year. Let's see. Let's start with the worst. As for nonfiction, I'm gonna go from 3, 2, 1. So the first one's gonna be like the worst book, and then the third one is the third worst book, if that makes sense. Coming in at number 3 is The Book of Awakening by Nepo. So the reason I picked up this book was because Oprah swears by it. I was very into like spirituality and stuff in the beginning of the year and in the previous years before that. So I felt like this was going to be like an aha awakening book, but it ended up just being a lot of fluff and like poetic things that to me I'm kind of over, especially in like spiritual books. Like when you first read it, it makes sense and you're like, oh my god, that's so great, it's a great way to look at life. But then once you like live day to day and you realize that a lot of these people will just create things out of unnecessary events in life to make it like magical and whimsical, and to me I just like found myself rolling my eyes a lot. I can read to you guys like verbatim my review on Goodreads from this one, because I feel like especially right after I finish the book, whenever I write my reviews, my mindset is in that book because I had just finished it, and this has been such a long time because I feel like I read this one in the beginning of the year. So here's my review like verbatim. I said this book was kind of hard to get through. Overall, it had really impactful messages, but you have to really dig to find them. Nepo explains simple life lessons with the use of many metaphors, which I don't really enjoy. I really am not that type of person. I'm like, give it to me straight. I don't want to hear like this like elongated sentence about nothing, you know? You're like making it into something way bigger than it needs to be. It seems that every single thing he experienced, he had to somehow dissect symbolically. Yes, I prefer to take life as it is and not try to make anything more than what it needs to be. This book has a lot of fluff. If you like poetry and symbolism, it's a good read for you. But for me personally, this is just not my style, and I really hated like even looking at the book. I was like, oh, I gotta read. Like, it just wasn't great. Coming in at number 2 as the worst nonfiction book that I read this year is How to Change Your Mind by Pollan. Now this one is really intriguing to me because it's about psychedelic drugs. I'm not one to do drugs, but I love hearing about them and understanding what it does to the mind. Not like hardcore street drugs, but like psychedelics, to me it's just very interesting. I don't think personally, never say never, but I would never really never say never, but I would never do it. In my mindset right now, I just am like, it's not my thing. But for people who have done it, especially like in different countries and stuff, I feel like it's just such a really interesting topic to talk about. They cure like diseases and like PTSD, and they like really dive into your mind, and it's like a world that you can't reach without the psychedelic. The name of the book is literally How to Change Your Mind: What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and Transcendence. So that's what I was going into it, but I am telling you guys, like, that part, the title of the book is the last chapter of the book. The whole beginning part of the book, which is literally this thick, is just the history of psychedelics, and it is the most boring book ever. Because I was like waiting for the interesting parts and like what psychedelics taught you, but it was just talking about which mushroom looks this way. It was a lot of like name dropping of like the people who started it. It was just, I was so disappointed. Again, I'm gonna read my review. I said it's more of a history book. He adds a lot of jargon and descriptive words to describe something that could have otherwise been told in a few short words. That's a big pet peeve of mine, is when authors like, they think because they're a writer that they have to throw in these gigantic like scientific terms. It's just like, to me, pointless and very like egotistic to talk like that, and I just didn't like it. I said if you get to the last few pages, it's more interesting, and it's recalling different people's journeys with psychedelics, but that's the only part that I liked. So it was just a really big disappointment to me, and I hated it. Coming in at number 1 is the worst book I've ever read. I found myself getting angry reading it. I was literally frustrated at the fact that I even bought this book, but it's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, and you won't see it on my Goodreads just because I couldn't physically finish the damn book. I do have a review on my Instagram. Okay, so I said I couldn't finish. This is everything wrong with the self-help book. A little bit brutal. All about magic and materialism, not my style. Oh yeah, that is something I freaking can't stand, is when there's a spirituality book and it's literally about how to win the lottery, how to change your appearance. I'm like, that is not what spirituality is about. Okay, and it just frustrates me when they try to sell like how to live the commoner lifestyle of like, the more you have, the more you are. He explains very simple ideologies and somehow made them into a 300-page complex book. I was pissed. I hated it. I feel bad, but literally the worst book I've ever read. I feel like this style does more harm to people than good by taking them out of reality and into fairy tale land. Yes. I think people take his advice because he uses quantum language. That's another thing that like spirituality people do, is like, again, it's like jargon and like big words that get other people to think that they know what they're talking about, when in reality they're just like, oh, I know this word. To describe positivity and meditation, trying to justify magic with science, I just couldn't, ... I was just not having it. So those are the worst nonfiction books. As for the best nonfiction books that I read this year, number 3 is Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss. So this is a book about a psychologist, a doctor, and he basically dives into past life regression, which is like hypnotizing someone to the point where they like visualize and see like their past lives. It's super interesting to me. Whether you believe it or not, it is just interesting how people can be hypnotized to the point and see all these things. It correlates to like their problems and their struggles in life. So even if it's not true, the fact that it helps again with like PTSD, it helps with suffering and pain and dealing with things and addiction, it's just really interesting to me. But he like kind of goes on this journey with this girl, and he thought it was BS until he worked with this one girl and he would like hypnotize her into these past life regressions. She would say things that he would find in like history. He himself, who was like a skeptic, was like in shock and awe of some of the stuff that she knew about certain things, like tools. Like if she went like way back, like he would Google it or something and it would like really be a thing, and she had no idea. She was just like I think she's like a model or something. Like she's like this really pretty girl that like lives in this world that is just so like, she wouldn't know these things. She's not like a history professor or something like that. It was just like crazy, and so many different life lessons. She speaks to this higher being or higher power that would like dive into like deep core life lessons you would never know until you died and like came back, and then you would like understand your purpose in life, if that makes any sense, and like what you brought to the world or the lesson that you learned through this life. And she has all these different lives that she learned all these different lessons from, and they're just like so profound and life-changing. I really loved that book. It was so good. I made my dad read it too. Coming in at number 2, I'm not done with the book yet. I have 50 pages left, but I can tell it's literally changed my life. It's Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I am so motivated by this book. Cut and dry, straight to the point, no BS. This guy has been through it all. He's like an ultra marathon runner. He's a Navy SEAL. He completed 3 weeks of Hell Week. He's run 200 miles in like 30 something hours, and he is just like a superhuman being, and he like somehow mastered his mind, and he is so real and so straight to the point. He's like the type of person that you want to read a self-help book from because he's lived through it. There's people who like literally sell, you know, self-improvement and what are those things called, conventions and stuff like that, and they make a ton of money on like these motivational quotes and stuff, but they're not actually living the like hard life that they are like preaching. And this guy doesn't want money, doesn't want shit. He's just like, here's my story and this is how I mastered my mind. And it's just so beyond incredibly good. I started running long distance from this book. I really hate running long distance, but it's like the kind of book that like you read and like you put it down and you go do something. You don't sit there and be like, oh yeah, let me go journal about visualize about my dreams. Like you actually get up, do it, and it's because of him. I am just so fascinated by him. He is incredible. Highly recommend, especially in the beginning of the year if you want to like start the year off strong. Pick it up. And then the best number 1 nonfiction book that I read this year is probably no surprise to you if you follow me, but it's How to Be Yourself by Hendrickson. She talks about social anxiety. She's a doctor. I struggle a lot with social anxiety and just anxiety in general. If you are not a socially anxious person, you can benefit a lot from this book. It's all about confidence and self-esteem and how to live the life without getting into your mind. It is the most incredible book I am so thankful I found it. It's helped me tremendously. A lot of the videos that I'm going to be posting in the beginning of next year in January, every Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a series of like things that I want to improve on, and I'm going to be doing some research about how I can improve on certain like resolutions that I have for myself. And a lot of them, probably like 80% of the material that I'm talking about in those videos comes from this book. All right, going back to the worst, we're going to do fiction books now. So the number 3, the third one that I really didn't like was Stephen King's The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I'm a very impatient person and I really hate books that don't just like get straight to the point. I like the twists and turns. This was a very self-reflection type book, but the person is like analyzing herself. Basically, this little girl's like lost in the woods, and it's like her journey through just being stuck in the woods. It's kind of creepy, it's kind of eerie, and it's a lot about like the mind and the psychology behind like when you're alone or when you're afraid, and it could be really interesting. But I'm the type of person, again, this is just my personal opinion, I don't like the descriptions of things as much. I find myself getting bored with that. I really like dialogue in a book and between characters, and this was just one person in the woods, and it talks about like the description of the woods, you know, the mindset that she's in, and it was just like very dragged on to me. And I don't think the book is a horrible book, it's just not my personal preference. So the second one comes in as the second one is What Alice Forgot by Liane Moriarty, and I'm pretty sure this is a girl that did Big Little Lies, which was even more of a disappointment because her books are really good. This is kind of like an older book of hers, I think. It's such an interesting like idea. It's basically this girl who is like married and in love, and she has a baby on the way, and then she wakes up like 10 or 20 years later, and she like is 30, older. She's like into fitness, which she's never really been into. She has like 3 kids, she's divorced, and this whole whirlwind of like she has to figure out, like her mind is like in the mindset of when she was like 20, and she wakes up with like that's all she remembers. And I'm like so intrigued, and I was just like reading it, waiting for something to happen, waiting for something to happen, waiting for something, and nothing freaking happened. It just kind of like dissipated. You're like, wait, what the hell just happened? What was that for? I just read a whole book going up a mountain, but I never came down. I was just like, there was no peak. I'm like, what the hell? Like, I literally put the book down and I was just like, what was the point of that? It was so disappointing and boring. I hated it. And it was so like cringy fake, and I hated it. And then the number 1 worst fiction book I read this year was Cottage by the Sea by Debbie Macomber. Now, I should have known this because I'm not the type of person to grab a book based on the cover, but this cover was so pretty, and it was like summertime, and it was like cottage, and I'm not really into like love stories, but I'm like, oh, let's like be in the moment. Such a pretty book, like it's calling my name, it's signed, whatever. Oh, it was awful. It's like, you know those Hallmark movies that are just so cringy and so unrealistic? Like, that was the type of book. It was a Hallmark, Lifetime, whatever movie that is so cringy and fake and not real, and I hated it. It was very, very boring. Again, just not my style. As for the best fiction books, number 3 is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. I don't know. This one was really good. You develop a strong connection to every single character in the book, which is really rare. Usually like the book is biased or kind of veered towards one character that you kind of have to like or dislike a character. All of these characters, you like understood their point of view, and it was just interesting to me of like how you interpreted each character and how you kind of like fought for them or understood why they were doing something wrong or something like that. And it was just a really interesting book to read. I can read you my review of that one. Yeah, basically the same thing. It's like you understand each perspective in such a unique way, and you find yourself on everyone's side. My favorite line sums up the book perfectly. One has followed many rules and one had not, but the problem with rules, he reflected, was that they implied a right way and a wrong way to do things, when in fact most of the time there were simple ways, none of them quite wrong or quite right, and nothing to tell for sure which side of the line you stood on. It's like, it just gave me chills just even reading that. It's a really, really, really good one. So the second one was The Girl Before by J.P. Delaney. This was such a psychological thriller in the best way. It was cold and eerie when you read it. It's a mind fuck. I finished the book I think in like 3 days. Again, it was like one of the ones that I read in the beginning, so I'll read the review. I was like, well, that went by fast. This book was written as cold as the characters and 1 Folgate Street, and I loved every minute of it. Yeah, because it's based around this like house, and it's like a smart house, and like it tests you psychologically and physically, and like there's certain rules that you have to like partake in to be a tenant of this house, and it's just like the characters in a mind fucked in this house, but so are you, and it's just really cold. I only had to pick the book up 3 times to finish. I love the constant twists and turns. There's a lot of twists and turns. If you like twists, it's like literally like you're over here and then you're over here and you're like, holy shit, I'm up here. Like, it's crazy. You think you have everything figured out and then you get blindsided. You become entangled in each character, just as they do with 1 Folgate Street, which is the house. Tied me all the way until the very end. I really enjoyed that one. And then as for the first one, the best fiction book, probably even the best book I read this year in terms of like every single book, is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is his first book, which is absolutely nuts. I made my friend buy it and she read it in like 2 days. I bought it for my mom for Christmas. This book is such a weird freaking story. It's about this artist. She's like a well-renowned, like lives in I think it's like Central Park or London, like an elite, like really high-end area, and everyone looks up to her because she's a great artist, whatever. And then one day she shoots her husband in the head and then doesn't talk for like ever, like never. And this therapist thinks like he can get into her mind and get her to talk, and like so he really tries, and oh my god, I got chills. Like, if you've read this book, that ending is just, oh my god. Oh my god. Never have I ever been that shocked from an ending, ever. It's such a good book. I don't want to give too much of it away, but I highly recommend that one. So I'll leave all of those in the description box if you guys want to pick them up for 2020. If you guys have any book recommendations for me for the new year, definitely let me know. Don't forget to check out my Goodreads account. Add me on there, I'll add you back. I hope everyone has a really good new year. I'll see you guys probably on the first Wednesday. I think that's the 1st. It is the 1st, so I will see you guys on the 1st. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you then. Bye guys.